everyone, my name is Cam Nigra with Blue Sky Training, and in this video we're going to cover steps for maintenance to maintain a healthy home. Now, all of these steps rely on the 8 core principles of healthy housing. So this video can either help you review the concepts discussed for the BPI certification of healthy housing, or it can just help you maintain your home, starting with applicable steps that you can take today. So there are 6 general steps. First things first, we need to identify the needs of maintenance. Now, this can take a lot of different forms, but generally we're going to try to narrow down the locations that we need to maintain, whether that's inside the home or outside the home. And do we just want to maintain on a daily, weekly, or monthly or yearly basis? Now, after we've identified our needs, we need to determine our level of ability to maintain the home. This can either be we need specific tools in order to complete that task, or maybe we don't have the skills required or the knowledge required in order to complete that task, such as lead remedy or radon mitigation. Now, for those, we would need to hire a professional, which leads us to the next step, which is schedule time for your maintenance. And whether that's scheduling time for a professional or doing it yourself, it's going to be better if we can put that down on a calendar. Not only as a reminder, but let's face it, sometimes stuff doesn't get done unless it's on a calendar reminding us to do it. So once we've scheduled our work, we can then prioritize by season. And this really ties into the scheduling step as well. But essentially, we're going to prioritize our work based on when it needs to be done according to the season. So for plumbing problems, like we need to blow out our sprinklers or maintain our pipes at a proper temperature, that's going to need to be done before winter. Whereas other stuff like maintaining the AC or making sure that we have proper insulation or shading on our windows for summer, that way we can be ready for each season as it comes. Then we'll plan for the activity up front. So we'll collect everything we need. That way we're not taking 20 trips to Home Depot in order to complete a maintenance step, but instead we have all the tools required and all the materials required. And if necessary, we have scheduled that professional to come and complete the work that they need to do. Then we can check off the task, and that's going to help us with satisfaction. This is a proven psychological step that gives us that psychological boost to help us know that we are maintaining our home well, even if it's just something small. Let's start with outside the home as far as maintenance goes. So walkways and doors are going to be one of the first steps because we always want to maintain these and keep these clean. It'll be a major way to keep a home safe. And 2/3 of dust inside the home that becomes breathable dust as we're sleeping comes from outside the home. So if we're taking care of those walkways, then we are maintaining a healthy level of breathing inside the home with that dust and debris. We also want to make sure that we keep watch on decks or whatever material our decks are made of, whether that's wood or concrete. We want to check those for continual safety, as well as our handrails, because this can be a major issue when it comes to safety. In fact, 53% of injury-related deaths that were preventable happened in the home, and many elderly die from falling and tripping over certain hazards or on decks that aren't properly maintained each year. So we want to check those for durability and then loose debris, whether that's something sharp like a screw or something simple like just a bag of grass, something like that. So we want to make sure we're cleaning up that and keeping the home safe. We also want to look at the roof. So we want to remove debris from not only the shingles, but also the gutters in order to help keep that home dry. We'll check for loose shingles and flashing so that no water is working its way into the cracks and gaps of our roof. We'll clear our downspouts so that water can properly flow away from the home. And we'll look for previous water damage. That way, before we go ahead and get started on other forms of maintenance, we've actually checked for water damage and know if we need to remedy water damage before we move on with the rest of the principles. And this will help keep it dry. We also have foundations and walls, which we always want to make sure we're checking for cracks, and we grade land away from the foundation so that water is not pooling up around our foundation and causing major issues. So we're going to check for grading. We're going to clean out vegetation. And simple cracks will help spray foam or caulk those. That'll help keep pests out. And then we'll also check our infrastructure. So whether that's the AC unit outside or any electrical or piping, we want to keep it dry and pest free. We'll also check our electrical. Now, this includes checking for vegetation and large trees around power lines. We'll check for exposed outlets on the outside. If an outlet is outside the home, it should have an outlet cover so that water doesn't enter the outlet and cause a potential fire hazard. In certain cases, we may need to notify the utility company. So if we smell gas leaking around our gas meter, we'll definitely notify the gas company as soon as possible. And if we see large trees around power lines, we'll want to notify the utility so that they can safely take care of it, so that way we don't lead to any fire damage. We'll also look for loose wiring covers, again, just as a health and safety precaution. A lot of time, pests and other animals will start chewing at the outside of electrical wires, and so we'll always check those for safe sheathing on the wires itself. So again, keeping the home safe, which is very important, again, with that high number of preventable injuries, 53% happening in the home. We'll also look for steps inside the home. So this might be electrical. Again, we want to make sure we know where our panel is. That way, if there's a problem, that we can go to it and shut it off. We'll check for loose wiring. If a circuit is frequently tripped or a breaker is frequently tripped, we may need to check the wiring on that, because that might be a sign it's not running properly. So it's a good thing it actually tripped, because that means it shut it down before it could be a problem. But that means it might also be a form of wiring that needs to be remedied by an electrician. We'll equip outlets with safety plugs, especially if there's children and animals around the home. We'll evaluate flickering lights using surge protectors, and specifically electrical power banks with surge protectors on them. We'll make sure none of those electrical circuits are overloaded with any wires, and we'll check uncommon areas as well. So once a year around there, you might want to check the attic for wiring, because a lot of times wiring in the attic can become frayed, like we have in the picture here. Again, keep it safe again and again and again. Keep it safe is a very vital, healthy housing principle. Next, we'll look at lighting and plumbing. We want to replace old lighting. So whether that's an incandescent, because it's highly inefficient, in fact, 10% of the energy going into an incandescent light bulb is actually used as light. The rest is just lost as heat. So we want to replace those for efficiency and also for fire safety. But we'll also replace any CFLs, the compact fluorescent lights, which are those swirly light bulbs, because those may contain mercury, and actually do contain mercury. And if they break within a home, that could be a problem. So we'll replace light bulbs frequently. That way we can have newer light bulbs like LEDs, which are going to be far more efficient and safer for the home. We'll also check for leaks in plumbing. We'll inspect hoses. We'll find the main water valve. That way, again, just like the electric panel, we can shut it off if needed. We'll check dry drains. Now, this is important because they're found usually in basements or on the lower levels of homes, and they're supposed to block sewer gases, which can include methane, from entering the home. But if they dry out, that blocking system stops working, and then you may have like a sewery smell in the basement. If you smell that, you want to check the drains around the basement floor and make sure that we wet them down to reseal so that sewer gases do not enter the home. We'll also check for the spread of water anywhere and check the sump pump, make sure it's operating properly if we do have one on our lower levels. This relies on all the principles of keeping it dry, keeping it safe, and keeping it contaminant free as we remove those aspects of mercury from our home. Now, before winter, we'll check to make sure all of our pipes and ducting is insulated properly. If any ducting is outside the condition zone, so say for example you have ducting in an attic, we'll want to make sure that that is insulated to at least R8. That's not only going to help with efficiency, but just general lifespan of the unit as well. We'll check our attic insulation levels, make sure they're up to R60. Essentially, that's going to be the recommended level for an attic so that we keep the most heat or cool air depending on the season. We're going to make sure we operate our furnace before it breaks in the middle of a cold snap, because we want to make sure that we're not left in the cold for long periods of time. So check and make sure the furnace is working after summer. And you may need to thaw pipes at some point during the winter. You should use a hairdryer and not an open flame for that, because that would lead to pretty severe issues in certain cases. This is all going to rely on keeping it comfortable, which may seem like a trivial thing for some people, but if there's vulnerable populations like elderly or children or already sick people living in the home, keeping it comfortable is actually going to help with overall safety as well. We then have any HVAC checking that we need to do for maintenance. So we'll check for leaky ducts. This can actually be pretty easy. You'll turn on the system and then you'll go around to each of the supplies and check and make sure it's blowing out the same amount of pressure as the other supplies. And if you hear a lot of clanking or clanging, it may be a size of the wrong ducts. It may be a case of wrong duct sizing, so you'll need to get it resized. And when you replace the system, potentially maybe size the system properly with a manual J. We'll also want to test our carbon monoxide alarms. This relies on HVAC. If there is combustion appliances, we'll make sure all of our carbon monoxide and smoke alarms are working properly. We may want to consider upgrading to higher efficient units if we're using a lot of energy as well. This is not only going to help with the pocket and potentially not upfront, but over the long run, it will help with electrical costs and just general home efficiency entirely. And many of the higher efficient units are far safer because they keep combustion within the unit. So they're sealed combustion units and higher efficiency as well. We'll check the pressures, we'll check the ages, make sure nothing is over this time span. For example, water heaters generally are recommended to be about 15 years. Over that, you might want to look at replacing with a higher efficient unit. We'll also just dust and check baseboard fins. So this all relies on the idea of keeping it ventilated and, again, keeping it comfortable. Then we'll move on to check our other systems. This is, for example, a radon system. So we want to make sure that we, first of all, have radon mitigation. If we have a dirt crawl with no barrier and no radon fan, we definitely want to remedy that and get a radon test as soon as possible, because that can lead to severe health problems like lung cancer later on. And sometimes with high enough levels of radon, it may even be similar and comparable to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. We'll test for asbestos if needed. So, for example, we have vermiculite in the attic and maybe we want to remove that or check our insulation levels. We'll test for asbestos. We will clean fireplace and ash to keep particulate matter out of our breathable air, because that can also be pretty dangerous. We'll clean dryer vents, even in the back. So that not only means removing the lint from the lint trap, but also cleaning the dryer vent that's supposed to be vented outside. We'll also look for damage on that ventilation so that we can keep it maintained, contaminant free, and ventilated in the home. Now, the home is a system. All of these aspects of maintenance work together to form a healthy home, and they're generally focused on prevention. We want to prevent problems before it happens. So when we take care of a problem, we then need to keep the problem maintained. Which brings us to the point that keep it clean, which is a core principle, and the first one, somewhat of a foundational level of the healthy housing principles, was not in there, because keep it clean applies on a weekly and even daily basis. Almost every form of maintenance is affected by keeping it clean. It's hard to keep a room dry sometimes if there was water damage and it wasn't clean. We also may not even notice water damage if it's not clean. It's hard to keep it contaminant free if we're not cleaning with the proper materials. It's hard to keep vents working properly if they are not clean. So the list goes on. Every part of a healthy home relies on keeping it clean on a continual basis. So this is how the home works as a system, and this is healthy housing principles summed up in the last step of maintenance as it brings it full circle. Now you can go ahead and practice, and if you need to, take the course for BPI certification on healthy housing principles with Blue Sky Training.